Right, and we're back in Randland. It's been way too long. Hi guys, Elliot here, and welcome back to another Wheel of Time video. It's been a while. So long, in fact, that I'm overdue some mentions. So firstly, I'd like to give a big shout out to the Dusty Wheel for letting me be on their show a few months back now. It really has been quite a long time. It was a lot of fun. I had a great time talking to Wheel of Time fans and discussing the books in a conversation where I didn't have to spend the whole time begging people to read them. So if you haven't checked out the Dusty Wheels channel, please go over there, watch the video. I'll put a link in the description, subscribe. The content is amazing. So now let's get into the video, and this is going to be a tricky one. When I published my first Wheel of Time video a very long time ago now, one Reddit user posted a comment saying, "I'd have to disagree with the best fantasy series. I'm not about to name a series that is, but really, Robert Jordan cannot write female characters." Like one of Eludra's experiments, this sparked a very heated discussion which I've seen many times before and constantly seems to surround the series. Is the Wheel of Time sexist? I'll level with you. I can see why this is such a debated discussion and where the origin of the opinion comes from. I'd like to say from the outset that all opinions are equally weighted, whether you like, love, or loathe the series for whatever reason. The Wheel of Time is not flawless. I'm not promoting the series because it's perfect. For perfect, read Hyperion by Dan Simmons. But I do think the consistency of the conversation surrounding sexism in the series does lend some credence to the criticism. So if you're still watching, which I hope you are, in the rest of the video I'm going to explore some of the more popular points attributed to the argument and discuss the ways in which the TV show can address these criticisms and make sure it's a positive force for good in terms of promoting equality. Lastly, I'm going to take a wider look at the issues of sexism that have attached themselves to epic fantasy as a genre, so be sure to stick around for that. Part 1. The magic system and the world as a whole is divided by gender. Gender is a huge part of the Wheel of Time. In fact, it's built into the very fundamental physics of the fantasy universe. I'm going to try and break this down concisely. Please do let me know if I succeed in the comments. So, firstly, you've got the one power, the driving force of creation. It's what turns the Wheel of Time and provides an endless supply of energy for magic users in the series. What's the catch? Well, the one power is divided into two halves, Saidar and Saidin. And for reasons, it's gender that limits which half of the one power a magic user can tap into. For women, it's Saidar, and for men, Saidin. I hope you're paying attention. There will be a test at the end. A lot of time in the books is dedicated to learning how to channel using the one power. Men are told that they must seize hold and control the flow of Saidin, whereas women are told to open up and submit to the flow of Saidar. Men are described as being, in general, stronger with the one power and better with fire and earth magic. Seemingly to make up for this, women are more skilled with water and air and have the ability to link their power and become stronger as a unit. Admit it, when it's condensed like that, it does begin to sound stereotypical. But let's leave magic behind for a minute. When we are first introduced to Emmonsfield, the home of our heroes, some time is dedicated to describing how the village is governed. You have the village council, which is made up solely of men, and the women's circle, which is made up of women. Neither group is described as having more power than the other, and both seem to have final say over certain issues, but it does all lend itself to this underlying notion that society is split, with women on one side and men on the other. As if to cement this concept, we have the White Tower. Now, the White Tower is a all-female magic-wielding world power with roots of influence that spread across the Westland to every monarchy, court and council. They are the boss, and their members, the Aes Sedai, are often described as being above kings and queens in the hierarchy. As a result, often the White Tower is portrayed as cultish, and the Aes Sedai act as if their decisions outrank everyone else's, which can get pretty infuriating to read. And I think the criticism surrounding the portrayal of women is often directed at the White Tower and the Aes Sedai, particularly the male-hating faction known as the Red Aja. But all of this is not without context. At first glance, it may seem as if the table is set for some serious gender-related issues, but all of this is part of Robert Jordan's world building. There's a reason why society is split and why the most powerful organisation in the world is made up solely of women. It's because men go mad with power. And I'm not talking figuratively. In the Wheel of Time, male magic users literally lose their minds. 3,000 years before the events of the book, Sidene, the male half of the One Power, was tainted by the Dark One, dooming every male who tapped into it to slowly go insane. And they do. A big part of the lore is this event known as the Breaking of the World, which is pretty much how it sounds. All the male Aes Sedai went mad and caused so much chaos that the continents are now literally a different shape. And it would make sense that the ripple effects of this cataclysmic event would also shape society to look like how it does at the beginning of the books. Part 2. How the TV show should address this criticism. This is the tricky part because in my opinion, the taint on Sidene is one of the most unique and interesting aspects of the books. A world where male magic users are hunted down and effectively killed for their own and everyone else's safety, and yet one where the messiah and prophesied saviour of said world is a man who can use magic, who is doomed to go mad. I mean, tell me you're not sold by that pitch. In order to keep that dynamic though, you do need to keep that emphasis on gender that the series has. But the idea of having your sex define so much about you, the power you can wield, whether it be magic or political, doesn't really flow with the notions of gender fluidity that we have today. With regards to the TV show, I believe there's a responsibility when adapting older source material to give it some relevance in the current zeitgeist. And that may mean changing a few things. Firstly, the idea that men are in general stronger with the One Power should be thrown in the bin in the opening minutes of the first writers' meeting. There's no need for it, it doesn't add anything to the story, and it would be so much better if the strength and resolve of our characters is what determined their ability to use magic. And the same goes for what elements characters can manipulate and how good they are at linking. Let's use Nynaeve as an example, because I love Nynaeve. I think it's fair to say, at the beginning of the series, she has a particularly fiery temper. Okay, so she's good with fire. But initially, she's reluctant to accept help from other people. Okay, so linking, maybe not her strongest skill. I said it a lot in my last Wheel of Time video. Filmmaking 101 is show, don't tell. And the TV series has an opportunity to use magic as a really interesting way of showing us much more about a character than just what genitals they were born with. A lot of story elements, and in a way, the essence of the story itself, would be ruined by not having the One Power split into two halves. But why not include some representation of transgender or gender fluid characters who can decide which half of the power they draw their strength from? The good news is this idea is also on the showrunner Rafe Judkins' mind. When asked about the representation of LGBTQ+ characters in the series, he said, "I think gender is such a key theme of the books, and discussing gender without a full representation of LGBTQ+ people would be a disservice to that discussion." Legend. So what can we change about the White Tower and the Red Arja for the TV show? I say, ramp it all up. This may sound controversial, but hear me out. I think the prejudice of the Red Arja, the creepy cultish nature of the White Tower should all be exaggerated for the TV show. But, and it's a big but, make sure it is presented as a fundamental product and problem of a broken world. An obstacle that our heroes have to overcome. I said before that the stage appeared to be set for some serious gender-related issues, but I believe those pieces were intentionally placed by Robert Jordan to make a point. And for me, that point is that men and women need to come together to save the world. I know this isn't the moral everyone will have taken away from the books, but I think it's a good one, so why not make it a central theme of the TV show? You could even go a step further and have the splitting of the One Power be a product of the Dark One, his first move against the Creator in trying to take over the world by dividing half its population against the other. But I'm getting ahead of myself there, so let's move on. Part 3. Sexism as a fundamental problem with epic fantasy. Sexism is constantly brought up in discussions about fantasy as a genre. So let's take a look at the history of fantasy, some of the reasons why this association exists, and what we can do to help separate sexism and fantasy in the future. The term fantasy describing the genre first came about in the 1940s, but the genre is far older than that. In fact, you could say it's one of the oldest genres in the world, with its close association with the myths and legends and folklore in our past. The main difference between fantasy and folklore is belief. The myths and legends that were told thousands of years ago had some level of actuality attached to them. The heroes and the beasts that they thought were all believed to actually exist in our world. Whereas with fantasy, it is accepted that the characters and creatures and setting are all products of the author's imagination. Fantasy as fiction emerged in the 19th century as a branch of the Romantic movement, a response to the rise of industrialization and capitalism. People wanted to return to a simpler time where traveling a vast distance in a day could only be accomplished with magic. This brings me to the first explanation I came across when looking into the association with sexism and fantasy, and that is the historical accuracy argument. Many fantasy novels take inspiration for their setting from our own past. Game of Thrones, for example, takes place in a medieval feudal society where issues like succession and politics were heavily influenced by gender. The argument goes that in order to present this setting scrupulously, you have to also include the sexism, racism, and discrimination that permeated the period. In response to this argument, I'm very much on the side of it's fantasy. The genre is an exercise in imagination, and I don't think you can use the argument that women had a less active role in society in the past to justify having poorly written female characters. Another explanation might be the people who are writing the books. For this video, I optimistically Googled best fictional fantasy series and clicked on a website called bestfantasybooks.com. Seemed to make sense. I took a quick glance at their top 50 list, and by quick I mean the first 15 books, but out of those first 15, only 2 were written by female authors. The Earthsea Cycle by Ursula Le Guin and the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. This is interesting because one of the first fantasy writers ever was a woman named Sarah Coleridge, who wrote a book called Phantasmion in 1837, and it is regarded as the first fairy tale novel in English. Her work actually inspired George MacDonald, who wrote a book called The Phantastes in 1858, and this is regarded as the first fantasy novel written for adults, and in turn was a massive inspiration for authors such as C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. Obviously, I'm not for a single second suggesting that male authors can't write believable female characters with interesting story arcs, or vice versa. But I do think it is important for us to look at our reading habits and try and diversify the content and the authors of the content we consume. Trying to follow my own advice, for me, next on the reading list is the Earthsea Cycle. But if anyone watching this video knows of a fantasy series or book that challenges the norm, please do let me know in the comments. One of the more interesting ideas I came across while doing my research was this notion of Robert Jordan as a transitional author for fantasy. If you compare classic fantasy like Lord of the Rings to modern fantasy like the Stormlight Archives, The Wheel of Time is somewhere in the middle. In fact, many credit the series as a catalyst for change within the genre. Robert Jordan recognised the need to have more realistic and relatable female characters in his book that play a much larger role in fantasy. Did he totally succeed in The Wheel of Time? Maybe, maybe not. But it's hard to get from A to B instantly, and he did carve out a path for other fantasy authors to follow. So bringing the video full circle to the comment that kickstarted it off, Robert Jordan cannot write female characters. I would be upset if this were true because my favourite characters in the series were Nynaeve and Abienda. Perrin would be the third, if you're interested. With 148 point of view characters and multiple plot threads, it makes sense that some will occasionally fall flat. That said, I am a straight white male, talking about books written by a straight white male. And so when I hear criticism about the series, especially with regards to representation and discrimination, I want to take the time to listen, because I know that the majority of them aren't personal attacks against me or the authors I admire. It's important to call out sexism and discrimination wherever we see it. Getting a different perspective on a book or series you love shouldn't be a frightening process or affect the enjoyment you experienced or the message you took away from it. Acknowledging and discussing these criticisms is the best way we can bring about change. In the Wheel of Time's case, gender plays such a huge role in the books, and whether that's good or bad, it undeniably gives the TV show an opportunity to promote a powerful message of equality. And if I were the showrunner, I'd see that opportunity as a responsibility. Thank you everyone for watching. A lot of the information I got from this video I discovered on Philip Chase's YouTube channel. So if you haven't checked that out, there'll be a link in the description. Again, huge thank you and shout out to The Dusty Wheel. There'll be links in the description. Go check out their content too. And then once you've done all that, head on over to thread.com because there's also great content there. There's great content everywhere. I should probably be promoting Thread as the priority, and don't forget to like and subscribe and let me know in the comments your opinions on sexism in the Wheel of Time and in fantasy in general. I have a feeling it might get a little bit heated in there. Please do try and remember to be respectful to everyone. Everyone has opinions and that's what makes life interesting. So be respectful or just don't comment. If you're not going to be respectful, I don't want you to comment. I might gate the comments for this one. Thanks again and see you next time.